everybody, and welcome back to the Ohio State Sport Management YouTube channel. I'm Emily, and today's guest is Tom McGinnis, who is currently the Senior Associate Athletics Director for the University of Minnesota. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So to get started, would you mind giving us a description of your career journey thus far and what your responsibilities are in your current role?
Absolutely. So I was lucky to grow up in a college town in Charlottesville, Virginia, where the University of Virginia is. So that's kind of where I became interested in working in college athletics, attended a lot of events growing up there, football games, basketball games, women's basketball games, soccer games, just all types of events. So started my education at Indiana University, where I did a sports marketing and management degree there. Continued to be involved in a number of different aspects of their athletic department through some different internships, jobs, and then the summers continued to work at the University of Virginia's athletic department, making some stops in a couple different offices to kind of learn what sports information was and spent some time in football and game management. So a couple different offices there. So after 4 years, like many people, I realized I was competing against other individuals who already had advanced degrees for jobs. So I decided that maybe that was a path for me. So I applied to a couple different programs and just was really impressed when I came to Columbus for the first time to spend my weekend interviewing. Was really impressed with the faculty, the other students I got to meet, prospective students, I guess at that point I got to meet. Learned more about the graduate program and then certainly about a lot of the practical experiences that would potentially be available as a student there in the graduate program at Ohio State. So was offered the opportunity to continue my education there, as well as an opportunity to be a graduate assistant in the athletic department working in event management. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me to make that decision and come there. And then was very fortunate for 2 years of my graduate assistantship. I was supposed to work for an individual who retired a month before I got there. So essentially myself and a couple of my graduate school cohorts basically did a full-time job for 2 years. So it was an incredible experience, which was very valuable. And then we were very lucky that after 2 years, we were offered full-time jobs to continue there as assistant directors of event management. So spent about 7 years doing event management in OSU's athletics department, and then decided that I wanted to potentially go beyond working in event management. I was the director of event management at that time, and reached out to our chief financial officer at the time and said, "Hey, I'd like to work on some projects with you." And she said, "Absolutely, just come back to me kind of once the fall settles down." She posted a human resources job about a week later, and I applied for it. And I went to her and I said, "You know what? I have no experience in human resources, but I'm going to apply for this job anyway." She goes, "Go, sure, knock yourself out." So I ended up getting that job, not so much because I had any human resources background, but I think it was my 7 years working in the department already that made her understand that I knew what the department needed from a human resources person. She said, "I can teach you payroll. I can teach you policies. I've been doing this for a long time, but some of the other intrinsic department knowledge you've already got will be valuable to us." So started in that role. Mike Penner kept me involved in football just a little bit, just to keep me enticed on the event management side of things. And then about 6 months after I took that job, Gene Smith was hired. And Gene obviously put a lot of value in the human resources role in college athletics. So I was able to learn a lot from him, become very engaged in his reorganization, as well as a number of other projects that I kind of viewed it as I was a couple offices down the hall from him, and I think he would go down the hall with a project for somebody, and I just always seemed to be the person who was in my office. Everyone else was out and about doing things. So I continued to take on roles and started working with equipment, IT, and a lot of other tasks throughout our department. So was very fortunate that I was able to continue to grow in my role there. And I think I got to the point where I probably wasn't able to grow much more without having duties taken away from other people who weren't going to have their duties taken away from them. So I looked for an opportunity, and a friend of mine who actually is another graduate school classmate of mine from there, Phil Eston, called me about an opportunity at the University of Minnesota to come here, be the chief financial officer and human resource officer, and work with a couple sport programs. So After 14 years at Ohio State, we made the transition here, working in finance, HR, and was the sport administrator for men's and women's hockey. And then we've had a couple transition with ADs here, so my roles kind of have shifted around a little bit. So I continue to work with the men's and women's hockey programs, work with wrestling and soccer as well. And then I've kind of shifted back to some of the stuff I work with Ohio State. So I work with event management, equipment, IT, and then some other various tasks. But the majority of my time is spent working as the sport administrator for those four sport programs. So that's where I sit today.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really, honestly, a lot of the people that I've talked to, like working in the event management office at Ohio State, has been a catalyst for their career. So that's super cool. And it's also just cool to hear about all the different aspects of the sport industry that you've been able to be a part of.
Well, I was very lucky that I was there at a time in that office when, the Schottenstein Center opened. We went through the renovation of Ohio Stadium. We certainly had some very interesting high-profile football games. We were able to host the first and second rounds of the basketball tournament once Nationwide Arena opened up for the first time in, I don't know, it might have been ever. So you're right. I was very lucky to be there at a time when a lot of things were happening, and certainly got a lot of great experiences working there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's super cool. So what would you say are some of the challenges that you face in your current role?
I would say, I think across college athletics, one of our challenges is always trying to identify resources. Coaches are very much committed to running successful programs athletically, socially, professionally. And they always have visions for what they want to accomplish, and that always requires additional resources. So I think in college athletics, we're constantly striving to identify additional resources to be able to support our sport programs, whatever the new trend is at the time, whether it's social media, as you mentioned, or doing different types of video for your programs from a recruiting perspective. It will be interesting to see that all the new things that people have figured out how to do over the past 3 months, as we've lived in a virtual world, how many of those things will carry on, and we're going to want to do more recruiting virtually, and different ways to approach running our sport program. So I think that is probably the biggest challenge is we always have really big eyes and all the things we want to look at and accomplish in the future. It's trying to identify the resources to be able to accomplish some of the things we'd like to.
Yeah, it makes sense. It'll definitely be interesting to see like what sticks and what doesn't after the past few months. So kind of on the flip side, what do you enjoy most about your current role?
I think it's, I can't remember where I heard this exactly, but, college, as we know, college is kind of the pathway to the future for many young adults. And certainly no better place than college athletics. Obviously, first and foremost, we want to make sure our student athletes are getting an incredible education, earning a degree in an area that's exciting for them, that they're looking forward to a career in their future. We certainly understand the role that being part of athletics can play, and all the wonderful things that does for a young person's development. But I've really started to enjoy a lot of the additional student athlete development, career development work that we've been doing with our student athletes. It's really making sure, because when all of us, when we were 18, 20, you're not thinking about all the things you should be doing to prepare for your career. You're thinking about being a college student and the fun things that are associated with that. And really trying to make sure we're providing opportunities for the young men and women who are part of our sport programs to develop the skills, get the experiences, recognizing the value that their education, as well as this type of experience now, is going to help them when they're 30, 40, 50 years old down in their career. So really it's seeing our seniors graduate, have them talk about what a wonderful experience they had as a student athlete, and then hopefully making sure that we position them to be successful, whatever they choose to do next, whether they're playing professional, whether they're a professional athlete, whether professional in any other field that they've chosen, just making sure that we position them to be successful.
Yeah, it must be really cool to see them grow throughout their 4 years or however many years they're there for. So kind of on a more personal note, who would you say has influenced you most in your career, and how did they do that?
I think I've been very lucky to work for and with lots of great leaders. I would certainly say that, while I didn't work very closely with him during my time there, watching Andy Geiger, certainly one of the more famous athletic directors, not famous, but one of the more profound athletic directors we've had in college athletics, see the way he chose to lead our athletic department. He had just come off reading one of the Jim Collins Good to Great books. So he was, we were all about the big, hairy, audacious goals back then. Certainly Gene had his own different type of leadership style that was very impactful, and really his investment not only in having the student athletes grow during their time at Ohio State, but also making sure that all of the people who worked throughout the athletic department grew professionally during their time. Joel Maturi, I appreciate, he was the one that hired me here at Minnesota, taught me to how to be a sport administrator, and it's lessons that I continue to take today and the things that I do on a daily basis. So I think those are all. And then, I was very lucky to work with a lot of people who have gone on, Heather Like, Pat Chun, Martin Jarman, Ben Jay, a lot of people, Chris Schneider, a lot of people who have left Ohio State, left Minnesota, and gone on to be great leaders in our field as well. And I think I've been lucky to work with them and kind of see the things that they've done, that they've taken, that they learned alongside me, and have implemented in the leadership roles that they've accepted throughout college athletics. So I've been very lucky to work for and with lots of great leaders that have helped shape me into the role I have today.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know there's always something to learn from everybody, no matter what position they hold. So
absolutely,
cool to hear people talk about how, even just their coworkers, they learn something new from every day and influence their careers. So I know you kind of talked about what you enjoy most about your career. What are some of the main highlights that come to mind when you think about your career over the past however many years?
Absolutely. There's been lots of them. I've been very lucky to work in programs that have had a lot of success. As I mentioned, one of the things that I enjoy most is meeting with seniors as part of their exit interviews and listening to them talk about their experience as part of our teams, and how what an amazing experience was. And sometimes their best memories aren't even things that happened during competition. It was the friendships, it was the relationships they developed with their coaches, with staff, with their fellow student athletes. So I think that's what stands out most. But I can certainly tell you, I was very lucky to be involved in, I think it was the 2006, Ohio State Michigan game will always stand out. Number 1 versus number 2, and just the fanfare that was going on and around that game while we were at Ohio State. And I remember waiting at the stadium for Michigan to come in for their practice, and, news helicopters following them down 315. It was just you just had to sit back and it was just an amazing experience. But, and then I was very lucky here one weekend, once I got here to Minnesota, on a Saturday, I was in Detroit, Michigan, and our men's hockey team was winning a Big Ten championship in men's hockey, and I was handing out hats to them as they had won that championship. And then the next day, flew back. The next day, we're in Minneapolis, and our women's hockey team won a national championship in women's ice hockey the next day. So I was handing out hats. So 2 days in a row, Saturday and a Sunday, I got to hand out hats to 2 different groups of student athletes for winning championships in 2 different cities. And I'm just like, sometimes you sit back and go, they pay me to do this. This is really, really cool. So there's been a lot of great experiences and a lot of great championships and graduations and things like that certainly have stood out.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like one hell of a weekend. So can you discuss your involvement in sports outside of the U of M and outside of Ohio State, like the NCAA Final Four that was held in Minneapolis and along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been very lucky. The University of Minnesota has taken the philosophy that they're interested in bringing as many of those NCAA championship events to the Twin Cities community as they can. We're lucky to have great facilities throughout the Twin Cities. They can host an extensive list of championships. We've hosted, just in the past couple of years, we've hosted men's and women's Frozen Fours, women's volleyball national championship. Certainly the men's Final Four a couple of years ago was great. I got to serve basically as the point person from the university with the local organizing committee. Certainly had some focuses on specifically during that time during the games of what our staff was responsible for, but was lucky to be involved in the 2 or 3 years leading up to, and then kind of almost took a year to kind of lead down from it. So certainly seeing that role as a host institution, our goal was to come in and kind of reset the standard for what a host institution at the Final Four was like. And we worked very hard to integrate the Final Four, not into just the 3 games that are played here that weekend, but how we can integrate that experience into the academic curriculum at our institution to provide experiences for graduate and undergraduate students at the University of Minnesota to be involved in a great event like that. So we did a lot of that work that was great from that perspective. I was fortunate enough to serve on the NCAA men's hockey committee for 6 years. So I was involved in the planning of that championship and those Frozen Fours 1 year during my tenure. It was here in St. Paul. So that was very exciting to kind of play both roles, kind of a committee perspective as well as the host institution. So it was an exciting time and a great championship. Again, Minnesotans come out for all these events, certainly hockey, basketball, volleyball. It's all sports where Minnesotans are huge fans of these sports. So they came out and our community very much supported them. So it's been really exciting and rewarding to not only myself, but have other staff throughout our department be engaged in these events. Certainly we enjoy working at our Minnesota events throughout the year, but when you can bring in some of the most premier events in college athletics to our community and allow our staff to engage in them is really exciting. This year we were supposed to host the wrestling championship. Obviously it didn't quite work out for us. And then 2 years from now, we're going to be hosting the women's Final Four. So we've still got a lineup ahead of us that it's going to be just as exciting as many of the events that we've hosted the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's awesome. Bringing those events here is, a great opportunity for literally everybody involved. So that's, I'm sure, a super cool thing to be a part of. So you kind of touched on this at the beginning of the interview, but can you elaborate more on why you chose Ohio State for your master's degree?
I think Ohio State, I can't say I've tracked on all the other grad programs out there and how they may have trended in the last, I guess it's been a little while now, 20 years. But I think it was really the mix of the opportunity to get a great education mixed with the opportunity to get some great practical experience. I think all of us that work in sports or aspire to work in sports understand that as important as the education you're going to get, it's going to be important for someone to have invested time and effort into gaining practical experience in sport. And I can never encourage people to start that early enough. I speak to the undergraduate program here at Minnesota every now and then, and I look around the room and there's 40 or 50 kids. I'm like, okay, all of you are going to graduate from degrees with degrees in sport management from Minnesota. What will differentiate you is your practical experiences. So you're all going to have a great degree from a great institution. Now you're going to need to go and supplement that with practical experiences. So I just felt that of the programs I was looking at that time, Ohio State certainly provided the best mix of both education, but also the opportunity to get practical experiences. The crew was just about to get started, had been playing for a couple of years, but again, in my first couple of years there was the year they built Crew Stadium, which now is outdated, and now they need to build a new stadium, which again ages me a bit. But there was a big push at that point to bring the NHL to Columbus, which obviously they were successful with, and the new stadium for the Clippers. Obviously there was a lot of opportunities there in Columbus to gain experience in addition to gaining a great education. So it was certainly a mix of the two.
Yeah, I definitely agree. They still put such a huge emphasis on gaining that practical experience and helping you out with finding something right for you, and really pushing you to get your feet wet in really every area of sports that you could want to get involved in. So definitely been an awesome program to be a part of. So do you have a favorite memory from the sport management program?
There were lots. Again, I was able to develop some great relationships with some of my classmates. Ironically, I've got a Zoom call later this week with my 2 roommates who I was in grad school with. One of them, as I mentioned, Mike Penner, is still at Ohio State. The other one's Phil Eston, who is now the athletic director here at St. Thomas University. or
Oh,
University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. And we're just getting together just to see how we're doing. So I've been able to maintain some really positive relationships with classmates of mine. Chris Schneider, who was another classmate of ours, works at the Big East Conference. So I think probably, I don't know that there was one particular event that was probably the greatest memory. I think one of the greatest memories of me or experiences from my grad school day was some of the relationships I was able to build with people who I continue to have close relationships with today. And they continue to be professional colleagues as well as good friends, and really the opportunity to kind of build that when you're kind of in the trenches with folks there, whether we were officiating intramural basketball games or football games or working at various events and at football games. I think it was just a way to kind of be in the trenches with them and kind of cut our teeth together.
yeah, I would have to agree with that. I mean, we have a group of, I think, 20 or 21 people. And it's been so cool just to be able to grow closer with them over the year. Definitely a highlight for me as well. So we talked about how important practical experience is, but what would your advice be to students who are entering the current job market that is being so horribly affected by the pandemic?
And I say, from a job market perspective, yes, certainly you're probably going to see some hiring freezes. I could say particularly in the higher education side and college athletics perspective, you're starting to see until professional sports gets up and going again. I can't imagine they'll be doing a lot of hiring, and they're even furloughing staff at different places. So I think part of it is the reality of it is it's going to have to be some patience. Things will get up and started and rolling again. We're not quite sure when yet. But when that happens, I think sports organizations across the gamut, whether it's professional, collegiate, recreational, whatever area of sports you're interested in, will be anxious to bring people back. I think it's just going to be paying attention. Again, we'll in our athletic department, we've got X number of positions when I'm posting. Well, let me tell you, once they give the green light, they're all going to go up together and be out there. So, but I think, exactly making sure you're staying connected in the field during this time, I think is important. Whether it's taking opportunities like this to engage with some of the alums, I think certainly looking for ways through the different professional organizations. Obviously, NACTA is a big one in college athletics, NERSA in rec sports. I think all those organizations they can't do enough webinars right now. So I think what's really neat, as opposed to having to invest some resources into going to a convention and spending 3 or 4 days, which, don't get me wrong, gives you the opportunity to do some networking there. A lot of those organizations are making the presentations and seminars, et cetera, that they would have done at those conventions available online. So there's a way to educate yourself right now in ways that we probably haven't been able to do. I'm not the world's biggest guy in going to conventions, but man, if it's free online and I can watch it during lunch, I'll take advantage of things like that. I know the D1 Ticker does a lot of them. So there's so many of those organizations out right now are sharing knowledge virtually. And I think it's an opportunity to gain that knowledge right now, so that when the coin flips back in the other direction and these organizations are in a position where they can get back to hiring and bringing people in to help them be successful, that everyone's raring to go at that point.
Yeah, I'd say those are the two main themes that I've been hearing is networking and staying involved, and just being patient. And at some point, like you said, the switch is going to flip. Or yeah. So last question before we get to the more fun ones. What role do you see athletic departments across the country playing in furthering the conversation and making positive changes when it comes to race and equality?
I think we've got a great opportunity. I think we're very blessed. I've been in the Big Ten for a long time. And even before some of the events that have happened over the past couple of weeks occurred, Commissioner Warren was doing kind of a campus visits to all the Big Ten institutions. And I don't think he had a chance to get through them all before the COVID-19 situation kind of restricted his travel. But when he was talking about some of the pillars that were most important to him as he moved into his role as commissioner, it wasn't, media rights. It wasn't hockey championship games. Not that those aren't important to our conference, but some of his themes were financial literacy for student athletes, social justice, voter registration. So he had already had us starting to work as a conference on some of the initiatives that we've seen talked a lot more about in the last couple of weeks. Social justice, obviously a lot of college athletic programs have jumped on the concept that we need to make sure our student athletes are positioned to be able to participate in the election process this fall. Those were projects he had already started us on. So I'm very fortunate that we've got a leader that was already cognizant that those are things were important. They obviously have become in a much greater focus in the last few weeks here. So I think he has already positioned us as a Big Ten and then as the 14 different institutions in this conference to be prepared to continue that work. Because I think, college athletics is very high profile in this country. Certainly we have a lot of student athletes, so it's our role to make sure that we are using this opportunity to educate the young men and women who are in our institutions for 4 years. We're utilizing the opportunity for maybe having these people come in and interact with other people their age who come from different backgrounds, who are of different nationalities, different races. We've got the Black Student Association of Minnesota. We've got an International Student Association. We've got an Advocate and Allies group for people of different gender identities. So we've got a lot of organizations within our athletic department that try and provide opportunities for students of different backgrounds to have communities that they can feel comfortable with. But it's also an opportunity for us to come in, and we've got certainly some teams that aren't very diverse, and provide this opportunity for them to become better educated. I think just in the last month, I've become better educated on certainly things that I was not aware of, and we've learned from our staff. There's a video that was shown to our staff just recently about just the history of racial injustice at the University of Minnesota. And then obviously you could, just about any university, community, state can have similar. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us to become better educated, which allows us to be better educators as we move forward with the young men and women that we work with in the future. But also we have to recognize we have a platform. We're large institutions in our states. We're very visual components of those institutions. And it's going to be important for us to make sure we're taking steps. I can't say that I know what those steps are yet. That's part of the learning now and being educated for us to determine how we best approach the future and making sure that we can make it a better situation, so we're not dealing with this again a year from now, 10 years from now. As our athletic director said, he distinctly remembers being in college during the Rodney King situation, and here we are 30 years later, and it doesn't seem like much has changed since then. So we need to be in a position to make sure we're not saying that same thing 30 years from now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But it's really cool to hear about the steps that the University of Minnesota is taking, and hopefully other schools will follow in those footsteps. So on a lighter note, what was your favorite sports team growing up?
My parents both grew up in Chicago. So even though I was growing up in Virginia, we were Chicago sports fans. So I was very lucky. I think in elementary school, the Bears won a Super Bowl championship towards the end of my elementary school days. And while the whole world got to kind of relive the 90s era of Chicago Bulls basketball recently through the Last Dance series that ESPN did, I was a very big Bulls and Michael Jordan fan, and I guess it was middle school and high school for me when all that was occurring. So certainly the Chicago sports teams from a professional perspective have always been my favorites. And from a college perspective, like I said, I grew up in Virginia, so I was a Cavaliers fan, but I was kind of this transplant Big Ten fan in the middle of the ACC country. Always kind of cheering for the Big Ten schools, and now you always cheer for your alma maters, but you cheer for who pays your paycheck first, and you go from there. So
I like that. I bet you were super excited when the Cubs won.
We were, yeah, it was great. And my wife's from Ohio, so we had myself and one of my sons watching in one room cheering for the Cubs, and she and my other son were in a different room cheering for the Indians. So it was an exciting series for us.
A house divided. So kind of based off that, what would you say your all-time favorite sports memory is?
It's tough. There's a lots of them. I mean, yes, when you do this for a living, you get to have sports memories, multiple sports memories every year. So, um, I've been fortunate enough to go to a Rose Bowl. I've been fortunate enough to see teams win national championships. But I would say hosting the Final Four back in 2019 here in Minneapolis and watching those games and just seeing 70 plus thousand people in US Bank Stadium. Plus, there was a small perk, with the University of Virginia, my hometown team, actually winning the national championship that year. It was really exciting because, some friends of mine that I had grown up with were in town to watch their team compete. So I would say just sitting back and watching that event occur I would probably have to put right up there at the top for right now.
That's so fun. Sounds like a win-win.
Yes.
And so last one, if you weren't working in collegiate athletics, what do you think that you'd be doing?
For a long time, I wanted to be a marine biologist. Then I took biology and realized that wasn't going to pan out for me, and said I couldn't study for this for 4 years in college. I've always had an interest in public safety. So sometimes I think realistically, probably maybe a police officer or a fireman. Whenever they say what your dream job is, someday, if it ever works out for me, I'd love to captain a charter sailboat in the Caribbean. So that's kind of, I don't know how realistic that is for me, but I think that's, if you got to have a dream job, that's what it would be. So.
Hey, yeah, I mean, that's a super cool dream. Might as
There
well.
you go.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insight today and taking the time to speak with us. We really appreciate it. And I know a lot of people are going to be able to gain some really great, useful knowledge during this kind of difficult time.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to kind of go down memory lane, and certainly if there's anything I can do to help you or the program, I'm happy to help.
Thank you.